Hi, Miss Curdy here, and today we're going to be talking about rounding. Check it out. All right. And rounding is when we take a number and we alter it a little bit. We change a little bit to make it a more convenient number to work with. And you're going to notice that on this index card, I have several numbers that have been rounded to the nearest 10 or the nearest 100. And you're going to notice that all of these rounded numbers end in a round number, the number 0, either 1, 0, or 2, depending on if I've rounded to the nearest 10 or the nearest 100. In third grade, we're going to focus on rounding to the nearest 10 and the nearest 100. But when you get older and you're in fourth grade and fifth grade, you're going to start rounding to the nearest 1,000 or even 10,000. In third grade, we'll stick to rounding to the nearest 10 and the nearest 100. So let me show you a little example of what it looks like to round. Again, we're taking a number, say the number 74. There we go. And we're going to change it. We're going to alter it a little bit to make it a more convenient number to work with. So instead of working with the number 74, we can alter it a little bit to the number 70, because that is the nearest 10 to 74. This is really helpful when we're adding or subtracting, and we want to make sure our answer makes sense. We can round those digits because they would be round those numbers because they'll be easier to work with to get an answer that would be close to the exact answer, to make sure that our answer is reasonable. So let me show you an example of that. Say, for example, I was adding the number 74 plus 56. If I wanted to make sure my answer was reasonable, I could round those two numbers to a 70 and a 60, because those would be the nearest tens. These numbers would be more convenient to work with, and when I add those together, I can make sure that my answer is reasonable. This would give me 130, and then when I go and add these, I can make sure that this answer would be about 130. So that way I would know my answer is reasonable. We can use a hundreds chart or even a thousands chart to help us with rounding to the nearest 10 and the nearest 100. So for example, if I was going to take the number 37 and round that to the nearest 10, I can use my hundreds chart to see which 10 it would be closest to. So I see I have 37 here. If I scooch this way, I'm at 40. And if I start here and I go backwards, I would end up at 30. So then I can decide, am I closer to 30 or 40 when I'm at 37? And I can see here I'm only 3 away from 40, but I would be 7 away from 30. So 37 would round to 40 as the nearest 10. What we're going to do now is practice rounding to the nearest 10. So you will need this note sheet. At the top it says 8-3, rounding to the nearest 10. If you don't have that yet, please go and grab it and then meet me back here to work on this note sheet. Okay, let's begin. So one thing that we can do when rounding to the nearest 10 is we can use a table that we can create by counting by 10. So let's go ahead and fill that in. 10, 20, 30. So now I'm realizing this is not in the right order. So hold on, let me grab a new sheet. You can erase your page, pause if you need to. So we're actually going to go down. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 110, 120, 130. So even in the hundreds, the pattern will keep repeating. 190, 200. So one thing I want you to notice that when we're counting to the nearest 10, we are also ending up on some of our 100s, because 100s are also made up of tens. We know that just plain old 100 is actually 10 tens, where 300 would be 30 tens. So now that we've kind of listed out our tens and we can see what we're working with, let's think about the number 63. The number 63 is between which two tens? Where would that fall? So when I'm thinking about all of my tens, or I can even be using my hundreds chart, I know that 63 is going to be in between 60 because it's in the 60s. And also it will be topped off by the number 70. And now I need to think about which one are we closer to. So I know that 63 is going to be 3 away from 60 and 7 away from 70. So when rounding, I know that 60 is going to be the closer 10. So when rounding, 63 would be rounded to 60 as the nearest 10. So now let's think about the number 257. I want to think about which two tens 257 is in between. So when counting by tens, I'm actually going to come up here and use just this chart I made. So I want to go through and figure out where 257 would land. Here I have 240, not there yet, 250, 260. So I know that 257 is going to be somewhere in between these two tens, 250 and 260. Just like the number 57 would be between 50 and 60, 257 is going to be between 250 and 260. So here I'm going to put 250 and 260. Those are my two tens that it is between. And now I need to think about which one we are closer to. So I know 257 is going to be 7 away from 250. And over here, we're going to be 3 away from 260. So looking at this, I know that we're going to be closer to 260. So at this time, if you're feeling comfortable enough to use a note sheet like this and practice rounding, you can go ahead and get into your workbook on lesson 8.3. And if you're feeling not so confident yet, please check in with your teacher for another mini lesson so that you can do some more practice with rounding numbers to the nearest 10, whether they're plain old tens like these, like 63, or if we're up in the hundreds like 257. Please remember to use this note sheet if you need it. Have a great day, and I'll see you back here for our next video.